Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Opal Alapat, and I wanted to welcome you to this weekly's webcast by MRin Consulting. Today, we are going to focus on an updated version of the webcast Next Level Reporting with Narrative Reporting. And we've got quite a crowd on today's webcast. So what I'm going to do is have you all hold your questions. Feel free to ask them along the way. And what I'll do is I will go through them one by one at the very end. We have a lot of slides to get through. All right, so I work for MRin Consulting, and we do a lot of webcasts, and we were very fortunate to be the Oracle Analytics Partner of the Year, both globally and for North America, so we are very excited about that. My name is Opal Alapat. I am the Vision Team Practice Lead here, and I'm also an Oracle ACE Director and the author of the one book in the world on EPRCS/narrative reporting. So let's start with the basics. For those of you who may not have worked with this product before, what is narrative reporting? And this is actually an updated slide. I sent an email to El Marciante this week, who is the product manager in charge of narrative reporting. So for those of you who have never seen this product before, it has actually been out there for about 4.5 years. They have over 750 customers with over 50,000 end users. And I will tell you that I'll talk about this in a second, but narrative reporting has now been bundled into the new Oracle EPM Cloud licensing tiers. So it is going to be more problematic for them to gauge how many customers they have moving forward since June. But this is what the latest numbers were that he could give me. So if you haven't heard, there were some big changes that came down the pipeline in June of this year. And to be honest, what is really happening here is a bundling of the licensing. The products themselves have not changed too much, but the way that they are packaged and sold has changed quite a bit. So there are now two basic licensing tiers. There is standard and there is enterprise. And standard comes with a certain number of products and some in a limited fashion. And then enterprise basically comes with every single thing in EPM Cloud, with some limitations on EDM. The great news is for those of you who are interested in these licensing tiers, the narrative reporting product formerly called EPRCS comes with both licensing tiers. And FYI, EPRCS did change its name. They are moving all of their CS product acronyms to business names. So it is now called narrative reporting. And I just want you guys to know from a nomenclature standpoint, as we go through this presentation, when I'm referring to the entire suite of products, I'm going to call it narrative reporting, but there are multiple tools within narrative reporting, and I am going to refer to those within acronyms. So for instance, the narrative reporting tool within narrative reporting, which is a little bit awkward and confusing, I'm going to call NR. The management reporting tool, I'm going to call MR, and the disclosure management tool, I'm going to call DiskMan, which is what Oracle uses as well. And for those of you who have been around in the EPRCS world for a few years, they did have a custom application option, which was as data storage container. That has gone completely away in this new licensing, and really just because customers weren't using it. So for those of you who are maybe even new to EPM Cloud, narrative reporting is sold through a SaaS model, which is software as a service. And what that means is Oracle takes care of your infrastructure, your servers, your software patching and upgrades, and you basically just pay them a monthly license fee in order to procure your software. Narrative reporting is an important product. They've been saying this for years, but it's their strategic reporting solution. I will go into the different technologies within this umbrella suite of products, but it really is more of a reporting tool on steroids, an EPM reporting tool on steroids. So it's a cloud solution, it's standalone, it does not require EPM if you don't need it. It works with pretty much any Excel supported data source. It has workflow in one of the technologies as well as narrative reporting. It offers static reporting in lieu of financial reporting, that tool set, which I'll cover in a bit. And it even offers a statutory regulatory filing solution. So this is the direction that Oracle is going. They will eventually sunset the financial reporting tool, probably within the next 1 to 3 years is my guess, but that's just a guess. And they will replace it completely with the MR tool, which I will talk about in a second. So if you kind of think about the business need that this solution fulfills, there's different types of EPM reporting that exist out there. For instance, you have your standard types of reports that users usually can't change, they just consume them. That's what we call static reporting. This would be like a balance sheet or a cash flow or an income statement. Then you have drill through reporting. So if you need to get down to a lower level of detail that might not be stored in one of the applications in EPM Cloud, maybe you need to get to transactional level detail, or maybe you just want to drill from one number in a report to a completely different report. There's actually very different definitions of drill through, but that's what we call drill through reporting. Then there's narrative reporting, which you see on a lot of like 10Ks, 10Qs in the United States, also like annual financial reports, things like that. And narrative reporting allows you to basically show your grids and charts as well as have a narration around it. So it basically tells a story of a company or business. Then there's ad hoc reporting. Smart View is the tool of choice here that you're going to want to utilize. Ad hoc reporting is when you're able to explore your data. Maybe you have a question or you're trying to troubleshoot a data load. You're going to go into ad hoc reporting, and that's primarily Smart View, but you basically are going to be able to explore your numbers. And then there's statutory reporting, which is when you basically need to report to the street. Maybe you have to file into the SEC, things like that. And so that is also covered under the narrative reporting suite, and there is a tool that fits in there. And so just to kind of show you where narrative reporting sits and all of these different types of EPM reporting, they offer three main tools that handle three main areas on this slide. So static reporting, narrative reporting, and statutory reporting. So here is what comes with it, the three tools that I just talked about. So narrative reporting is going to handle your narrative reporting business use case, and it actually comes with its own set of workflow. So it can handle tasking, due dates, ownership and assignments. It can even poke people and tell them when things are due. It has a central repository, as do the other two tools, where it stores everything in the cloud. It can support any Excel supported data source, so it doesn't matter if your data is on-prem or in the cloud or even non-Oracle. If you can get it into Excel, you can get it into narrative reporting. And the object that this builds is something called report packages, which I'll talk about in a second. Then there's the management reporting tool, MR. So this is your FR replacement tool. This is your highly formatted static reports. It strictly uses EPM and BI cloud data sources with one exception, which is on-prem Essbase. This is an object that we call reports, not report packages, but reports. And we'll talk about this, but there is a migration path from FR to MR. And then finally, we have disclosure management, which we call DISCMAN for short. So this is your statutory reporting technology. And it actually is a tool that was ported directly to the cloud from on-prem. So for those of you who have ever heard of disclosure management on-prem, this is going to be your new technology in the cloud. It supports XBRL, regulatory filing. It has its own taxonomy designer, and there's actually an easy path from on-prem to cloud. So as far as what does the reporting environment look like? So as I mentioned, narrative reporting is an umbrella suite of products that has three distinct tools within it. And it actually feels like three distinct tools, to be honest. So there is a web interface, which is where you will actually develop your management reporting, your MR artifacts. And it is a distribution, it has a distribution option for NR, MR, and DISCMAN. Then there is Smart View, which is highly leveraged with NR and DISCMAN. So you'll be using both the web interface and Smart View for both of those tools. And the end users can consume your reporting objects, usually through the web interface, but they can also get things through email, as well as look at stuff through Smart View. So that's kind of how all of that works together. So now let's do a deep dive into each one of the particular technologies. So we'll start with NR. What is NR? So NR allows you to fully follow a reporting life cycle. And again, we're talking about narrative reporting here in the business practice of narrative reporting. So the way that this reporting technology works is you're going to create a report package template, which is basically like your placeholder for your entire report package. and you can create as many report packages as you want, and they can all be very different from each other. Then within that template, you're going to add objects called doclets, which are like your little report sections that you have within a report package. You can also organize them by section, and you can add users and owners to those sections and those doclets. And then if you optionally choose, you can actually go through a workflow process, which is different phases for NR. So, and we'll talk about that in a second, but basically there's an entire life cycle here around creating a report package. You have people creating content, you could have people reviewing that content, you can even have people signing off on the final report package. And that's what NR is built around. So here are the phases. They are completely optional, by the way, and you can choose to have none or 1, 2, or 3. It's up to you, and each report package could be different, and that's totally understandable. So this tool has a lot of flexibility. But there's an author phase, which is where authors go in and they collaboratively create content, essentially. So it could be all the different sections of a report package, and you can assign different sections to different users, depending on how you would like to do it. It's completely flexible to your organization's needs. Then there's a review phase, and in the review phase, that's where you have what we call reviewers. They can go and actually formally review the content that was created during the author phase. And in this review phase, there's actually an interface for it where people can speak back and forth, so you can avoid email, and they can highlight different things on your different report package areas and put comments next to them, and then authors can go back and make changes. And then if you choose to include it, there's a third phase, which is a sign-off phase, and that's where you usually have one person who's the signer. They will go in and review the entire report package and then sign off or reject the report package. And if they reject it, then of course you can go back and reopen the report package and have people make changes. But that allows, some type of workflow all the way throughout the entire process from start to finish before you release a report package, let's say, to the public. So in the author phase, if we just do a quick little deep dive in each one of these, so you have your authors, and these are actually people assigned as authors. They work in either Word or PowerPoint, which are the two main types of report packages. Note that you can also have PDF, but that's not really changeable. But they will work within Word or PowerPoint, which means that they're using SmartView within Word or PowerPoint to create the doclets that have all the content. And these doclets can contain grids and charts and images and text and all sorts of different things. Basically, whatever you can get into a Word or a PowerPoint object, you can get into a narrative reporting package. And what authors will do is it's kind of like SharePoint, where they only allow one person to work on a doclet at a time, assuming that you follow the procedure. So you can check out a doclet and make sure that no one else can work on it at the same time. Then when you're done, you can upload it, you can check it in, you could submit it for review, you can complete it, set it up for completion before you go on to the next phase. And there is an optional approval cycle here. Let's say that you have a junior developer who may not be used to authoring content, and so you want to do a preliminary review of their content before you go into a formal review phase that might have other owners. If you're curious about what an author phase kind of looks like, so this is a Word-based report package. You have a template that you decide on. I'll talk about the style sample in a second. And basically what you do is within SmartView Office, you go into that template, depending if it's Word or PowerPoint, and you just start creating stuff in there. So in this case, we've added some text, then we've added some charts and grids that come from Excel, and then we've added more narration around those, but that's essentially how it works. It's very straightforward. So then if we do a quick deep dive into the review phase, so this is actually a formal process where the authors can continue to modify their content, but essentially their first draft is done, and it's subject to review by the folks that are deemed as the reviewers. Each document must be marked as complete before you go into the next phase, which is the sign-off phase. So everything has a chance essentially to get reviewed. That's the check on that. And as I mentioned, there is a web interface where reviewers can collaborate with the authors. Here's an example of what that looks like. So through the web, a reviewer will go into the particular section or set of doclets that they have to review. As you can see here, They can highlight a specific area of it and then attach a comment to it, which the author then can go in and take a look at and then make changes accordingly. So that's how this works. It's a back and forth process. And then finally, if you choose to include it, there's a sign-off phase. So the way that the sign-off phase works is basically everything gets locked down, cannot be open for changes. So there's no ability to modify the contents of the report while the sign-off phase is occurring. Someone who is marked as the signer will get a notification that they need to review the entire report package. And then what will happen is they'll get a notification, they'll go in and review it in basically its final form. And then they have two simple options. They can either sign off or reject it, and then they can even add a little comment. And if it gets rejected, then of course there have to be additional procedures, which is you have to go back and open up the report package and make whatever edits the person would like you to make. But it's pretty simple. So that was NR. Now let's talk about management reporting, MR. So again, this is a very different technology from NR. This is going to be your static reporting solution. It is very much like WebFR for those of you who've worked in Oracle EPM Cloud with maybe planning or financial consolidations or one of the other technologies. And you'll see that it's a lot like FR. In fact, so similar, can you even tell what the difference is between these two interfaces? So in the top right, that's actually WebFR. So that's the FR tool ported to EPM Cloud. And in the bottom left, that's MR. So you can see that they actually resemble each other very much so. And you develop MR very similar to FR. MR in a nutshell is something that's already included in your subscription. Even if you have legacy licensing, it just comes with EPRCS. It supports EPM and Analytics Cloud, on-prem Essbase, as well as Fusion Cloud. It will eventually take over financial reporting and replace that technology. And it works very similar to FR, so much so that there is a direct migration path from FR to MR. Sorry, that's a typo down there. I should say direct migration path to MR. And so basically, if you wanted to take your FR reports, assuming that there isn't anything super complex or you're using a feature that's not in MR yet, all you do is you export your FR object and you import it into EPRCS/narrative reporting. And that's pretty much it. And you just go and check it. It's that simple. If you're curious about some of the differences, so MR was built on a forward-looking platform that allows Oracle to do different things with it that they couldn't do with FR. For those of you who've been in the FR world like me for the last couple of decades, you've probably seen that it hasn't changed a whole lot. And that's because they were pretty handcuffed by the platform. So they decided to build something new. So for instance, there is a number of charting options that don't even exist in FR. I think FR has something like 4 options, and this one already has more than that. And they have really cool features as far as a developer standpoint. What is it like? It's actually a little bit more intuitive than FR in my opinion. A lot of the development principles are the same, but maybe less clicks to do this or that. So highly recommend that you guys check this out and just know that this will be automatically included in the new licensing tiers. And if you're on a legacy licensing, they are going to port this into the EPM Cloud application technologies, and it will reside right next to FR. So if you're on Planning Cloud, for instance, you will have MR and FR as early as December of this year. If they don't make that deadline, it'll be early next year. And then you'll be able to just directly start moving from FR to MR. And again, if you're kind of curious about what MR looks like, so here is what the report development screen looks like. So on the left-hand side, there's all sorts of different little reports that you can add. You can have multiple pages in a report. They have a header section just like FR. There's a body section, and then you can't see it, but in the bottom, there's even a footer section just like FR. And then on the right-hand side, there's all sorts of properties depending on which object you selected. So it's pretty dynamic. But you can change, your page size, the orientation and position of your different objects. And there's even a little menu at the top where you can go into edit mode, you can go into preview mode. You can see this with an HTML, PDF, just very similar to FR. And then if you go into the grid and edit that directly, again, it looks and feels very much like FR. There's a dimension layout option where you can go in and move around where your dimensions are, if they're in the POV page or within the column or rows. And then there's properties panels on the right-hand side for all different types of objects. So the entire grid, or maybe just a column or a row or a cell. There's sorting, conditional properties, conditional suppression, what they quote call drill through, which just really means a URL that's linked to maybe a different report or an external location, but they have all sorts of different options in here, many that are in common with FR. And here's what the dimension layout looks like. It's all very drag and drop in MR. So in the dimension layout here, just like FR, you would take a dimension from one area and then you would drag and drop it to, let's say, columns, rows, or the POV page, wherever you'd like it to go. And then just real quick, again, for those of you who are new to this product and maybe don't understand the lingo, so the NR solution uses an object called report packages, and the MR solution uses an object called reports. A little bit confusing, but they have different object names because they're completely different tools. So the report packages within NR, of course, are going to have workflow and collaboration. It's not at all like FR or WebFR, very different tool. It can use almost any data source. It's directly integrated with SmartView and relies heavily on SmartView. And that's where you develop your objects. And it uses other things called docklets, sections, embedded content, and variables. Whereas on the report side, so within MR, there's no workflow or collaboration. You're developing directly in the web through the web interface. It's very much like WebFR. You use pretty much EPM cloud data sources, although you can have analytics to OECS space if you have that legacy licensing, or on-premise space or even Fusion Cloud. It does have a small integration with SmartView, which I'll talk about in a second. And you can use the same types of objects as you could with FR, which are grids, charts, text, and images. Okay, so disclosure management, I'm just going to gloss over this one because it's not one that I have a lot of experience with, but just in case you're curious about it. So this is your statutory reporting solution within narrative reporting. It provides you an interface where you can do XBRL tagging. It is completely compatible with Edgar, and it has its own like taxonomy developer area. There is a feature called country by country reporting if we're using the tax reporting cloud technology, where this directly integrates with that technology in this area. And just FYI, the Discman does not come with the standard new EPM cloud licensing, but it does come in the enterprise EPM cloud licensing. So that is where this is going to differ in the new EPM cloud licensing world. All right, so now let's talk about some cool features. And these, of course, are mostly going to be aligned with NR and MR. So in NR, there is something called a style sample, which again, we're talking about report packages, right? Which could be a 50-page document that has all sorts of narrative and story for how a business has done and performed over a year-long period, for instance. So you need to have a way to create a consistent look and feel for that entire report package. Things like page numbering, margin sizes, portrait or landscape orientation. And this is what the style sample will control. So there's a style sample object. It is required for every single report package in the Word or PowerPoint base. And it's something that's required up front, although you can edit along the way if you don't have it completely done. It can even be overridden, and you can see it in the preview. It will show you what the report package looks like with the style sample. So if you're curious about what exactly is it tapping into Word and PowerPoint, on the Word side, the things that it controls are the different Word styles, the margin sizes, what's in the margins, the orientation if it's landscape or portrait, the page numbering, alignment, headers and footers, page sizes, things like that. It basically shows you in a screenshot right here what's included. And what will happen is when you go to check in your docklet object, if there's any type of formatting that the style sample controls that is different from the style sample, what it will do is create this little triangle to let you know that whatever you're uploading is different from the style sample, and you can choose to override it or not. And a good example of why you might want to do this is orientation. So let's say you have a 50-page report package, and towards the end, you have some very important financial grids that you want to show, but they just happen to be wider than they are tall. And so you want maybe 5 pages to be in landscape versus portrait. So that's a perfect example of where you'd want to override this on the orientation, and you can do that. If we're talking about PowerPoint-based report packages, what we're talking about is tapping into the slide master. So you'll have to become very well acquainted with what a slide master is in PowerPoint, and that is what is going to control the look and feel of your PowerPoint-based report package. Another cool thing with narrative reporting is that, I should say NR, is that you can upload your own fonts. So let's say that your company has its own custom font, then you can upload it. There is within the library an area called fonts, and that's where we're going to assume that you have a license for every font that you upload, but you will upload your font files here, and this helps the web interface render your fonts correctly. It's recommended that if you have custom fonts, of course you upload those here. And even if you don't have custom fonts, let's say you're using Arial or Times New Roman or some standard font, for you to have a license for those fonts and to upload those here as well to make sure that the web rendering of your reports and report packages and everything look as good as they can. There is a very powerful feature in NR called embedded content. And I use it on every single one of my projects. I think it's extremely important for NR. And what it does is it allows you to create content within Excel, like SmartView grids or other types of grids, even text. In Canada, there's a lot of usage of notes to the financial statement. And so I create all of those in Excel as well. And then what you can do is you can create these objects called named ranges within Excel, and NR understands those named ranges, and it can convert them into what's called embedded content, which means that authors can use that embedded content in their doclets. So essentially they're direct linking to objects that are in Excel, like grids and charts and stuff like that, directly into their Word and PowerPoint report packages. And then every time those objects get updated and the correct process is used, they get updated in the report package. So it's very, very cool. It's a very powerful feature. It can centralize your content, and it can definitely help you have that direct connection back to, let's say, SmartView or some other data source that's used within Excel. So how do you set up embedded content? Just to kind of show you how easy it is to use this feature. So you're going to create something called a reference doclet, which is usually an Excel document. And what you do is within that reference doclet, which is basically an Excel workbook that's tagged as such, you will go and put all of your cool stuff like charts and grids and things like that. Then you will create named ranges around those objects. Then when you go to check in your Excel doclet into NR, and actually it happens through SmartView, what will happen is it will give you the option to convert those named ranges into embedded content. Then once you do that, it's available to the authors. They can just pick the different named ranges called embedded content, and they can import those into their doclets. And yeah, it just links directly. And so when you make changes to those Excel reference doclets and you recheck those back into NR, then it will pick up all of those changes directly into those doclets. If you're curious about how this works, and I bring this up because I think people kind of forget, or they don't necessarily have the light bulb go off on how everything works with embedded content. So what we're essentially saying is, I'm creating something in Excel, and then I'm going to somehow import it into, finally, some version of Word or PowerPoint. So how does that look? Because these are two different objects. So what's going to happen to my text and charts and grids? So I give this example to kind of show you how it translates and converts once the web re-renders it. So if you're curious about how text, so notes in the financial statement, for example, is a good usage of embedded content with text. So let's say that I have text in my Excel reference document on the left. If I import all of that into a Word-based report package, it actually looks pretty similar. I don't really have any complaints here. The resolution is really good. It comes over almost exactly the same. So I wouldn't worry too much about how text comes over. But data grid content, pretty much the same because we're still talking about text, but chart content is where you're going to lose resolution. So here's an example of where I created some embedded content in both a grid and a chart. I pulled it over. So on the right-hand side is what it actually looks like in NR. And you can see that there really isn't a lot of resolution on the grid because it's mostly text. but on the chart, there's quite a bit of resolution loss. And so what Oracle recommends is they have, I think, up to 300 DPI of resolution that they support. So if you have very important graphics that just have to be as pixel perfect as they can be, they recommend instead of using embedded content that you just directly copy and paste from the source into Word or PowerPoint. And the only thing there is that it's not going to be a direct link, but it's just important for everyone to understand. There's also objects called variables that exist within NR. There are static variables, which are very similar if you use planning or financial consolidation. This is going to be like your substitution variables or even your user variables. So this is something where an administrator has to maintain it. Perfect example is something like current month, where maybe the current value is October, and then I go in and I change it every single month. So next month it'll be November. And every time I go and change it, it refreshes it across my report package. And so then I'm just maintaining it directly in the web, and then it just kind of pushes it out to all my report packages that are using it. And this is, by the way, a report package by report package set of variables. So let me not confuse or mislead anybody here. You actually have to have variables by report package. There's also a reference variable, also by report package. And what this allows you to do is create dynamic values. They originate in Excel using, like a reference document. And the way that they work is you can actually have them tied to a formula that's in Excel. So maybe it's a data cell that comes in through a SmartView grid, or maybe it's an Excel formula. And it could be used for all sorts of different things. And let me just move on to the next one. Here is a cool example of how you could use these reference variables, which is with formulas to help you with directional text. So you could put in a formula that says, my revenues this quarter over last quarter are either increased or decreased based on an Excel formula that compares the two values and then gives you a text value as a response. So there's different ways that you can use these reference variables, but you can actually create self-maintaining narration if you have the ability to do that, where you could have all sorts of reference variables in there that just kind of self-maintain as your data and your time frequency updates. On the MR side, there's all sorts of really cool data sources. MR was created to really work with EPM Cloud and Fusion Cloud and even Essbase Cloud. So that's really what your data sources are going to be. The one exception is on-prem Essbase, which unfortunately a lot of customers don't really use because it requires that you open ports in your on-prem Essbase environment, but it is something that is supported with MR. Also on the MR side, earlier this year, they added a feature where you can take an MR report and you can do a grid import into SmartView. It is still in its infancy, just FYI. So what we're talking about is creating an ad hoc grid in SmartView from an MR report, and it is just the ad hoc stuff. So if you have report calculations in your report, which don't come from your source, but actually were built into the report, those would not come over, the formatting would not come over, but the POV does, as well as the ad hoc data. Oh, and by the way, some of these I have links at the bottom where you can actually go find my blog post that goes into details on each one of these features. Also added this year is Notes. So Notes is a very interesting feature for MR. What it allows users to do is it allows end users to directly add commentary on a report. So this is very similar to like the FR annotations feature, let's say. Now, notes are a little bit different here. The way that they work is you have to create essentially a template, and it must be set up by an administrator, and it must be parked somewhere on the report. And then once that happens, users can then enter their comments in that box wherever it's parked on the report. Now, these notes are also tied to a very specific point of view. So if I have it tied to, let's see what's on here. Let's say a particular entity that's not shown, let's say entity A, then once the user selects entity A, then that note box will appear. But if they're on entity B and there's no note template for it, that note box will not appear. So it's very tied to a specific point of view, and it's actually an independent object from reports and report grids. So they can even have their own point of views, and they can even be recycled between reports. So it's also in its infancy. It just was released a couple of months ago. but we already had a number of conversations with customers on how to use these and implement them. And then, of course, on the MR side, I mentioned that there's a direct migration path from FR to MR. It's a very simple process where you export your FR report, you import it into MR, change the data source if necessary, then test and fix errors. I will tell you that the import process itself is the fastest part, and fixing errors is the longest part. If you have a lot of dimensional changes between wherever your FR is sourced from to the cloud system where MR is, then you may want to learn how to hack your .des files in FR to speed the process up. And then the other thing that you need to be aware of is that there is not full parity between FR and MR today. That is now expected maybe in January and February of 2020, where pretty much everything is going to be available in a form or fashion in MR that used to exist in FR. So if there are specific features that you're using in FR, for instance, auto calculations or bursting in batch scheduling, those are the biggest gaps that do not exist in MR yet, but they are coming. And then just released last month is books. So this is modeled after the FR books feature. It's only in MR, by the way, because it only makes sense since narrative reporting has its own thing. This is a version 1 release, so just be aware that all the reports that are batched together into this book have to have the same data source for right now. It can combine their point of views. You can insert a table of contents, but note that it's different from FR and that you have to kind of use a Word document that you have to import. Prompts are supported, but just know that prompts will not run at runtime when you go to run your book, or when a user goes to run the book. It has to be set up centrally with the book set up right now in this version 1 release. There are even section dividers that kind of cascade to different hierarchy levels and dimension sections. I haven't played with this myself, but I noticed that it's there. And you can even set up the page setup, which will define consistency across your book, like page numbers, margins, headers and footers, et cetera, et cetera. So this is something that was just released, version 1. They do expect to enhance this, but this is what they're able to get out at this point in time. All right, so now we are nearing the end of this webcast. So the question is simply, does this tool make sense for you? As a customer, is this something that you want? So let's kind of go through it. So first of all, let's kind of compare what this suite of tools can do compared to other reporting tools. And just note that, you know, I only have a handful of features on here. It doesn't go into uber amounts of detail, but just at a very high level, how do the features compare to other Oracle EPM reporting tools like financial reports and SmartView? Because it can be a little bit confusing since there's a lot of overlap. So you can see that, yes, there is a lot of overlap. If you look at the first, half of the features that I've listed, they all support all these different things: EPM data sources, highly formatted reports, report calculation formula options, multiple output formats, although not all support all of these different formats, but they support a subset of these. Support for charts, images, and grids, being able to pull data from multiple sources into a single report. Depends on which tool you're using with SmartView, by the way. Then you kind of see where there are some differences. So one centralized repository. So of course, NR, MR, and FR on-prem support that, but not necessarily FR on the cloud, because it really only supports it for the product that it comes with. SmartView does not have that. What is compatible with Oracle Analytics Cloud Essbase? Well, this is a big departure. NR and MR do, but FR will not in the cloud. SmartView, of course, will. Everything is compatible with SmartView. The NR tool is the one that's purpose-built for narrative reporting. The NR tool is the one that has content and workflow management in it. And then as far as which ones are included in all the new EPM cloud licensing, well, all of them are. So hopefully that might help you kind of distinguish some of the characteristics that make each one of these unique. The one thing that I will tell you though is that one of the things that I've always liked about narrative reporting is that it does leverage your existing report development. So, usually with customers, if you've had an on-prem environment or even cloud, which has been around for over 5 years now, you probably have a number of reports that already exist, and you could be in the hundreds of reports. You could be, hopefully no one's in the thousands, but you could have hundreds of reports. And no one wants to spend the time to go through and rebuild everything, right? So what I like about narrative reporting is that it can leverage your existing report development. If you have a number of reports that already exist in FR, you can migrate them to MR, of course, with some exceptions. If you have a number of SmartView grids that already exist in SmartView, is there a way I can get those into NR? Well, of course, you can just take your existing SmartView Excel workbook and turn it into an Excel reference workbook, and then there you go. Now you can use it directly into NR. And you can even import MR objects into NR. So you can even integrate between the tools within narrative reporting once you get all your stuff in there. So it does allow you to leverage your existing report development, so you don't necessarily have to lose all of that just because you're going to a new reporting tool. And then finally, the basic, bare bones here, is narrative reporting right for you? Here's the simplest flowchart. The question I would ask you is, do you do any kind of reporting, like any kind of reporting? If your answer is yes, then yes, narrative reporting is right for you. If your answer is no, then basically I don't believe you. And yes, if you do any kind of reporting, EPRCS/narrative reporting is going to be right for you, because it handles all different types of reporting. It can handle all of your needs within the new enterprise EPM cloud licensing tier. And it can definitely handle your narrative reporting and static reporting needs within the standard licensing tier. All right, so I think that there have been a couple of questions along the way. I'm going to give you guys a chance to continue to put in your questions, and I'll go answer them in a second. Just wanted to let you know that I blog very frequently on narrative reporting. So I have over 20 posts on the subject. If you're curious about it, you can go into womaninepm.com, and I have a cloud tag on the right-hand side. You can go find narrative reporting, formerly EPRCS, and then you can click on that, and it will filter all of the blog posts to just those on this technology. In addition, NRL sells a number of books. We have one on narrative reporting. I will tell you, though, that it was last updated in 2017. It does have all the foundational concepts in it for NR and MR, but it does not have some of the new features of MR in it. And then we also have a number of free videos that are on YouTube, so no sign up required. And there are, I think, like a half a dozen that are on narrative reporting. Okay, so let me go through and find out what questions there have been. Let's see. Okay, first question. If customers bought ERP Cloud and then they get EPM Cloud by default, whoops, hang on a second. Does this mean that we will automatically get the narrative reporting piece once FRS is sunset? I believe that that is the case. I do not have absolute certainty on that, but I believe that what will happen is that you will either get a replacement technology for FR, or FR will continue. And just to give you an example, the reason why I say this is because I talked to the Oracle product management team at Oracle Open World during the EPM Partner Advisory Council and asked them what happens to on-prem people. So people who are upgrading to 11.2, what's going to happen to them when they sunset FR and EPM Cloud? And they said that they will just continue on with FR. They're not entirely sure of the direction there yet, but they believe that FR will just continue to be supported. So my guess is they're not going to remove your reporting tool. They'll just either give you a replacement or they'll allow you to continue using FR. Let's see. Does it have the batch scheduling feature? Not yet. So that is coming. They've already talked to me about what that's going to look like. It's going to be a version 1 release, which translates to not everything that FR has, but when they do release it, which looks like December or February, it will be a basic feature. I do believe what they told me is that if you have FR batches, those will have to be rebuilt in MR because it's a very different type of feature. But yes, it will be released soon, but it is not there yet. Okay, let me go check out the Q&A. Just wanted to be clear, you mentioned that FRS will be sunset and discontinue. Absolutely, that is completely clear. So, but I also want to just kind of caveat that with it depends on which tool you're on. So if you are in the on-prem world right now, let's say you're on 11.124 and you're going to move to 11.2, my understanding right now is that that will continue to use FR, and it will continue to support FR all the way through its life cycle through 2030, okay? If you are in the cloud world, so EPM Cloud, FR will absolutely be sunset. My guess, not Oracle's statement, but my guess is in the next 1 to 3 years. What they're going to do is they're going to import a light version of MR called reports into the EPM cloud pods like Planning Cloud and Financial Consolidation. And so you will have both side by side. And this is basically Oracle's stab at change management. So they want customers to start migrating from FR to MR when both are sitting side by side in EPM Cloud. And then once the customers have reached a magnitude where almost everyone has migrated off of FR, they will sunset FR. So that is how that will work. Also, will this presentation slide be available to view? I believe so. I will verify, but I believe we send this out to all of the customers after the webcast. When can we get this recording? Oh, the other thing that we do is, I think it's epm.bi/recordings. I think our replays of all of our webcasts that we do is something that we just recently started though. So maybe all the way up to like a certain point of 2019 when we started doing it. So this will be available probably next week on epm.bi/recordings. I think that's where it's located. Okay, I think I saw another question. Let's see. Nope, I answered all those. Okay. Any other questions? Feel free to put them in the Q&A. Question is, are there limits to how many cells and rows in MR? Well, I'm going to be honest, I don't know if there's some standard limit, but what I will tell you is I'm pretty sure if you asked Oracle that question, they would say it depends. So it depends on if we're using things like, conditional formatting, conditional suppression. What I will tell you is remember that this is cloud infrastructure, so it's going to perform automatically 10 to 15% better than anything on-prem, just because it's newer and faster hardware. So for instance, if you wanted to run a report that has 1 million cells in it, yeah, it might take a second to pull up, but I don't know if there are any hard limits. I'd have to find out and get back to you. And one point of clarification that I want to make for those of you who are curious about when MR comes into EPM Cloud and sits alongside FR. So I want to be very clear. I did a presentation on this at Kscope this year, but it's not full use narrative reporting, and it's not even full use MR. It's basically going to be just like FR, but the MR version of it. So I don't know if everybody knows this, but FR in EPM Cloud is restricted, meaning that in FR on-prem, you would have one FR server and you could attach to any product that it was compatible with. Like you could store all of your S-Space reports and your planning reports and your HFM reports all from a centralized server. In FR and EPM Cloud, it works differently. It's not one central server for all of your EPM Cloud applications. It only attaches to the product that it comes with and even the instance it comes with. So for instance, if you have Planning Cloud, you have a pod which has both test and prod, and the FR that comes with each of those only talks to the instance that it's in and the product that it's attached to. So the FR that comes with Planning Cloud prod only speaks to Planning Cloud prod. You can't speak to Planning Cloud test. And the one in test, so on and so forth. So it's restricted on what you can actually attach to an EPM Cloud, and MR is going to work the same way. You would need to have the full licensing narrative reporting in order to get the full features of MR, which would allow you to centralize all of your reporting from the narrative reporting tool. So hopefully everybody knows that, or if not, hopefully that's more clear on what you'd be getting with MR in EPM Cloud. And to be honest though, with the new licensing that's been unveiled in June, kind of none of this matters anymore. Once you go to the new licensing, then what will happen is you essentially get full use narrative reporting. So you don't really need to use FR or the MR that comes in Planning Cloud anymore, because now you've got full use narrative reporting, and it's better just to move there. Okay, there's a question about, is MR attached to FCCS? So right now, FR comes with Planning Cloud, financial consolidation, et cetera, et cetera. The MR that's going to come into those products is not there yet. I think they said it's still waiting to be approved, at least at the end of August it was. So they're hoping to get it in by the end of this calendar year. If not, it'll be there early next calendar year. But I believe that when MR comes into EPM Cloud, it will come into Planning Cloud as well as financial consolidation. So yes, it will eventually get there, but it's not there now, it's just FR. All right, I'll wait for about another 15 seconds to see if there are any additional questions. And if you guys have questions after this webcast, you can always reach out to info@interworld.com and they will route it to whoever the webcast person was. So in this case, it'll go to me. Okay, so we're going to call it a wrap. So again, thank you for joining us on this weekly webcast, and we hope to see you on a future webcast. Take care and have a nice day.